and that'll be online if anybody wants to read it on the website. Next, Architectural Control Committee. Tom Cable, do you have a report? I believe he does.
Thank you.
We get envelopes this time.
Is this our Christmas present?
Oh, no,
Is that mine?
There's a minutes from our last meeting on October 18th. We look at those.
Oh, it's a minus. Right.
Yeah, if you'd open it and then go through with the minutes of October 18th. Okay, usually you wouldn't provide minutes this close to the meeting, but trying to be active and get things done. As we know, there's only one more board meeting, December 11th, and so we've been trying to get things moving. There's some interesting things in these minutes for October the 18th. The first item I looked like is at the agenda items, and we've made some motions, and you'll see the red word moved on these. And one of these things that we found was there's some Article 42 in the board policy manual for strange reason. And basically it's about moorings, and it's a valid, good mooring rule for garden lots. It's still active, but nobody knew about it because it was buried in the board policy manual. So we're asking permission, or we're recommending that the board allow us to move that into the ACC document. So that's a recommendation. Not long ago, a couple months ago, we submitted a lot of rule revisions. Some of these are very short, simple rules. Some of them having to do with safety, very minor things. One of them having to do with the new city code. But we've heard nothing from the board in regard to that. And so the board, by motion, asked me to simply ask the board to let us know what happened to these revisions. And we're not asking for that right now, but if, you know, someone could contact us at some point, we'd be happy to know what's going on with that. I'd like to skip F and go on to G. We had a meeting with Greg Smith, the city councilman, and he said he would support this if he was reelected. But what this is that it used to be that the city, before it could process an application for a project or a house, had to have an ACC approved application before they could proceed. For some reason, that's reversed. And that is causing us lots of grief because we're finding a lot of projects and houses even being constructed without a POA permit, without permission. And so if we could have this, it would solve it. So if the board would write a letter to the city, which is what we're requesting, and also make this a high priority, prevent building without a permit by talking to the city, if we could get that done, that would be solve a lot of our problems for the architectural committee, and it would be a really great thing for the POA. Turning the page to something simpler. The board, the ACC, thinks it's a good idea to kind of split our function into me being the administrative person, handling writing things and minutes and so forth, and Robert Krusky is in a leadership position. And we think that dividing responsibilities in the committee helps to strengthen the committee, and then also if you lose somebody strategic, it's not as critical. And in fact, in the future, we may be spreading our duties out somewhat further than right now. So the ACC is asking the board to reappoint Robert Krusky as the chair. I would like to point out item I, which was really interesting, where the city council is considering raising the level of our foundation's height up to as much as 2 feet. The problem with that is that that's going to be great for our FEMA rate for the whole community if that happens, because all of our FEMA rates will go down for the entire community. And of course, it's an advantage to the individual homeowner. The downside is that all the houses being built then will be 2 feet taller. And if you do it the conventional way, by building up the land, the homes that are lower will be affected with drainage problems. So what will happen is we'll have to have homes that have exposed foundations that are about 2 feet taller, and maybe they can be landscaped or something like that, or stucco. But probably, I'm just giving you a heads up, that's probably the way it'll go if it happens. So it's just something to start thinking about, and that's why I wanted it to be in the minutes, especially for the board. And finally, you know, I'd like to get to our last recommendation, and I'd also like to discuss why we moved this up. We have been working through the ACC document in kind of an orderly fashion. The first time we proposed some things to get things in place, which is the original part of the document that kind of discusses the function and purpose of the ACC and so forth. And then there were some short recommendations that we thought were kind of an emergency basis, either for safety or something. And so we were planning to just proceed through the document from beginning to end. But recently, there's a strategic street that everybody's aware of, Gypsy Street, which has some really bad parking problems. And they've accelerated a great deal just within the past few months. So Gypsy is a strategic street. And one thing, from the PO building, you can see it. From Village Park, you can see it. It affects the property values of all the ports of call, because that's the entrance to those subdivisions. So if that street looks bad, it affects the property values of those areas. So basically, what we observed is originally there were parking problems that started at the end of Village Park with a house that had 4 cars parked in the yard, on grass, on landscaping. And recently it's evolved, where there's been 2 buses, commercial buses parked in a row in one house. And then a house close to that, there's been 2 large commercial trailers. One of them's about 35 foot long. It's an enclosed utility trailer, kind of like a big horse trailer, and kind of what I would call a roofing trailer, utility type trailer with commercial markings on them. And so this situation's gotten worse and worse. So currently, between White Cap on Gypsy and Encantada, there are 34 houses. Of these, 13 have these parking problems and involves 18 vehicles. And so I just want to go through this and then I'm done. And then everybody can go through the World Series. But I want you to understand why we're doing this. At one house, there's a black pickup parked in the rock at an angle on the rock. Another house, there's 2 motorized vehicles, cars in the rock, and they're paralleling the sidewalk. One's parked on either side of the front sidewalk, which is very strange. There's the 2 commercial buses that I mentioned. There's a pickup truck that's parked directly in front of their door, so they can't open the door. They're using it as a security measure to prevent people from getting in their house. It's just parked right in front of the front door. There's the 2 utility trailers that I just mentioned, and these are very new arrivals. There's a boat trailer that could be parked behind the building line. The way this house is that they don't have side property line fence on one side. They can park behind the building line. Instead, they park in front of one of their main windows, just sitting in the rock. There are 4 cars that I mentioned before, and this is the original infection, in my opinion. This is house at the end of Village Park, towards the north end of Village Park. It's 4 cars parked in the grass. One is parallel in the easement, which is against the covenants. There are, at the entrance of Hawk's Nest and the entrance of Eagle Nest, there are 2 houses that are right at the entrance to these streets that lead to these subdivisions, and all those streets back in there. One of them is parking 2 cars in the rock, parallel to the street. The next one has a SUV that's parked, doesn't have a license plate, it's parked in the rock. Next house has a Mercedes parked in the rock, just showing that it doesn't matter who you are and how much money you have. It could be an equal opportunity block parker. There's a now infamous vehicle that's on the corner of Gypsy Street and Hawk's Nest, and it now has some additions. You know, it's a 6-wheel, used to be an emergency beach vehicle, and now just recently the owner has added a structure on top of it to where it's now 14 foot tall of rusted metal. So it's just gotten to be crazy, and especially in the past few months. In addition, I've gone around and looked and seen that there are more RVs, and I'll be giving a survey on that pretty soon. And then also there's a Toyota SUV that is now parking on White Calf, on the south side of White Calf. South side of White Calf, in between the curb and the fence. In other words, it's actually kind of what would be in a common area. So it's just gotten to the point of being crazy. So therefore, we have written and approved and recommend to the board a parking regulation that we'd like you to look at. So we're asking you to submit that to the board that you should take a peek at it. And so we appreciate appreciate that, but I wanted you to understand why we moved that one up in our agenda instead of just working through the document. I appreciate your time. May your team win.
All right, thank you, Tom. Okay, moving on, Canals and Waterway minutes. Bill Sargent,
Just a minute.
minutes will stand. Very good. Item number 9 on the agenda, Treasurer's Report. Nick Colosi.
In your package, you have the monthly report.
Okay. Your monthly report, it's routine expenses, nothing large, nothing's coming to date. But what I would like to do is to make a motion to close the checking account at QBS. That will consolidate all our checking to American Bank. That will also allow us to proceed with more electronic banking, and instead of having 2 separate accounts, which are going to reconcile.
A motion before the board, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second discussion. I would like to say that the board used to have 5 checking accounts. And now we're down to 2, and this is going to bring us down to, we're down to 3. Now we're going to be down to 2. Having 2 checking accounts makes operating the business a lot simpler. Our CPA has recommended this. Money's not going anywhere, it's just going to be in one particular account. We will have one for the operating account and one for the builder's account. Builders bring us deposits, fees, that kind of thing, and it goes into a separate account for those folks versus our general operating account. This is a good thing. As you heard Jim say earlier, we've managed to put all of our employees now on electronic payroll in that they get direct deposit. We've crawled into the 21st century here. All right,
Yep.
so I'm in favor of this motion. Anybody else?
Question.
Question? Call the question. Sorry, that's scary. I'm calling the question. All in favor of the motion to consolidate to the one checking account, signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Treasurer? That's all, thank you. We've completed old business, new business. We're down to the executive session. Before we go into that, I believe we have someone interested in a variance, but unfortunately, the board doesn't know anything about this.
It's actually written in that packet, I just read it there.
Well, we didn't know anything before that. Just a moment. Tom, are you familiar with the variance?
Yes, yeah.
I-
There to deal with that.
I think you gave, when I read it, it said that you guys approved it, no, but you were waiting for us to approve, no? Which section is it, Tom? Yes, please.
Yeah, please, we don't
Yeah.
know anything about it, so.
Yeah, I was just trying to read it a minute ago.
Come on up here, Chris.
This is a long-standing issue, and this is Chris Gallegos, and she's with Lone Star Construction, and she has a deck that she wants to have a variance for. And the thing about this is kind of an example of the catch-22 that the ACC has had now for years, and so has the board, which is when someone comes to us and legitimately requests to do something, often they're denied. But if they build it without a permit, nothing ever happens to that permit. Nothing happens to that project. In other words, they just build it, they do it. So along Cova de Barra Street, which is on a large canal, their mooring line is restricted to only 10 feet, which is really weird for that wide a canal, because the normal for a wide canal is 15, okay? So that's the normal. And so, of course, everybody wonders why that is. So the thing about it is everyone, including me, would think the reasonable thing would that be 15 feet like every other thing, but you can't do anything about it because of the covenants. Now, in this case, there's a house next to the house that Chris is interested in that does have a 15-foot dock, but it has a variance. But prior to 1992, those the board, the ACC, could actually go against the covenants if they thought it was in the community interest. So this variance of this person next door is valid because it was prior to 1992. After 1992, the ACC cannot grant any variance that violates a subdivision covenant. And there's some good reasons for that. In other words, it's not all bad, you know, it makes sense. But in this case, it's one of those cases where it doesn't make any sense. So if you look at Google Earth and you look along Covadabara, you'll see all these illegal, quote, docks and also boat lifts. In other words, you put in a 10-foot boat dock and then they'll add a 10-foot wide aluminum boat lift to the outside of it, or you'll see extensively large docks. And so the committee must obviously, because it violates the covenant and it's not prior to 1992, we cannot approve the variance request. There's no peculiar hardship. It would have to be a new rule. In other words, we can't do a variance on that basis, and of course we can't grant a variance because it's against the covenants, okay? So what we're saying is, we're not trying to put the board on the spot, but we're always on the spot. So let me put it this way. There's a lady on Mingo Key, okay? She's on Mingo Key, which is just right there. I mean, you can throw a rock and hit it. They have the 10-foot mooring line. Lady Debbie, I think her last name Debbie Banks, she comes up to me and says, hey, I wanna extend my dock past the mooring line. I say, well, Debbie, you can't do that. And she takes me out back, and here's two houses right next to her that have 15 feet. You know, now I don't know if they were done prior to 1992, don't know. But if they weren't, it makes it a really tough situation to be a POA ACC member and have to tell people that try to get permission, no, you can't do it, and people that don't get permission that they can't. So basically, I'm saying we need to just do something about this principle in general. The ACC cannot possibly grant this variance for the two reasons I mentioned, but I am referring it to the board, and I'm basically in support of her position. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Covadabara could have 15-foot mooring lines? It'd be great. But
So this isn't the one on Benassi? Got in the packet?
No, we already did that. Benassi was granted because it was a garden
Oh,
lot.
okay.
And I believe Covadabara is also a garden lot,
it is a garden lot.
which is the 50 feet.
It's 10 foot in their case in the covenants. In other words, that one,
Right.
that's a weird one.
Right.
Most of the garden lots are 15, this is 10, and that's the subdivision covenant. So, you know, that's part we're kind of here. I don't see I can grant the variance, but I do feel like that something needs to be done to make it equitable for people that seek, like Chris is, to do it the right way versus people that just build things without a permit. So that's my comment. Any questions for me?
No. What? No, sorry, folks, you don't get to ask a question. Personally, I don't know enough about this to make a good informed decision. I would like to carry this over to the next meeting or sometime in the near future so that we as a board can understand what the problem is. Tom, do you have any issue with that?
No, except that I'll write you a paper on that, and I'll send it to you because you'll have it in writing, exactly what all the problems are. And I'll write you a whole problem with the mooring situation, the whole 9 yards, so you'll be educated in it. But it's really an issue of what are we going to do now? For Chris's perspective, you know, if she doesn't get a variance, you know, which I don't think she can, but she would have a time crunch issue, and of course you should speak to it because obviously she won't get to build this the way that the owner would like. But I don't necessarily think that should happen. In other words, I don't think that you can grant a variance here. But in the long term, we certainly should think about doing something, either having people remove their things that are illegal or somehow moving those mooring lines. So that's my thought.
Well, I don't speak for everybody, but I don't believe we have enough information either on the bigger picture or her particular situation to make an intelligent decision here tonight.
Very reasonable.
Anybody agree or disagree with that?
I agree
I
with
agree
you,
with
I'd
that.
better look at it. Martha?
Yeah, it seems to me that, you know, obviously you brought this issue forward, but it seems to me we need to look at the bigger picture of that whole channel or subdivision or whatever, and I agree, I don't have enough information right now, but I think it makes a lot more sense to look at the big picture at the same time and just get the facts and then make a good decision for everybody.
All right, how about we have Tom get back with you after we get time to take a look at it and see what we're gonna do.
Okay, is there anything that you need from me? I mean, this has been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. I mean,
Well, this is the first we've heard of it.
right, and
Could you write down your information?
I contacted Heather, well, me and Heather have been working on it, and she said that she was gonna go ahead and send everything that you guys needed, so that way we could do this, so.
We just got this packet,
Right.
Tom, a minute ago, so.
Right.
you know, it's
Very
not-
good, thank you for your patience with us. We'll try to get this resolved and make a decision here. All right, moving on.
Starry, starry night.